Hello and welcome to Atmosoft Tech Talks, a live show where we discuss everything you need to know about software development and technology in business. I'm Natasha, your host, and joining me today is our COO, Bill, a solutions architect at Atmosoft. Hi, Bill. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So today, our topic, contrary to the title, is
Yeah.
how to secure your application after deployment. So we're
Yes.
going to be talking about some questions with that today. So let's just dive right into it with our first question. Can you describe some strategies to ensure the security of an application after it has been deployed?
Okay. Deployment. When we're talking about deployment, there has been a change in the industry as soon as DevOps and DevSecOps kind of came out, where we have better collaboration between the networking team and the development team. When I first started, it would be well, we'd be doing a Windows application or some type of application that you installed because the web just wasn't what it is today. And so it'd kind of be like you would do an application and you would just basically throw it over to the setup packaging team, or if it was hosted somewhere or whatever, you just throw it over the wall to the networking team, and they would take advantage they would go deploy it, and then you were done. So your development stopped as soon as you had your build, and then you toss your build over to QA, or you toss your build over to the networking team to do whatever you need to do with your build. So as we've migrated, we started to notice that there is some overlap between development and operations, and we started working kind of in a more unified pattern, which is great. And so I think and I want to set up to answer the question. So the answer
Yeah.
to the question is basically you need to work with the team that's doing the deployment. If your team is not doing the deployment into production, you need to work with the team who is doing the deployment and make sure that all the security bases are covered. And the networking software development, huge space, right? And not there's I know a lot. I can do deployments, I can secure servers, I can set up firewalls, I can do routers. I know about how all that works, but a lot of developers might not know that. And so if your team is weak on the networking side or the deployment side or the operating system side, it's good to have a resource that's kind of more senior or kind of really focused in on the networking side of things, because that's really where you got to lock things down, right? We want to make sure that users are authenticated. So again, who are you? We want to make sure that users are authorized. What can you do? And we also want to make sure that the hardware and software that we're running on is secure, is secure, right? So that is one benefit. If you don't have a strong networking team or you're not working with a networking team, that is a great benefit that the cloud can provide, where you don't have to worry about all of that. Microsoft or Amazon takes care of of securing the operating system, especially if you've used so we go up the stack, right? You can have a VM, and you're 100% responsible for everything that happens to that VM. Setting up the VPN, setting up all those different pieces, making sure it's secure, make sure the OS updates are applied. But as we go up the stack in cloud offerings, and we go to like a SaaS offering, like a web application deployed into Azure, they take care of all of that for you, so you can trust. No, Microsoft knows what they're doing. So I mean, you can trust that they're going to have everything secured, and then you just need to worry about your web application, making sure that you don't have any security vulnerabilities there. But I think the core answer to your question is work with someone who's knowledgeable about where your application is going to be hosted and deployed, so that you can make sure that that environment is as secure as possible. And if you're not that guy, then you need to make sure that you're using resources that can help you make sure that you're not, I didn't accidentally flip this not best practice flag when I installed the IIS, or I accept all traffic on all ports in my firewall. Those are the type of things that we want to try to avoid. And when there's a lot of potential financial risk for a company, we want to make sure that we address all of those issues and make sure we're as secure as possible. So I think the core answer to the question is communication. And if you don't know something, Don't say like, oh, I know how to do IIS and set up Windows and do networking and set up the VPN and all that, when maybe that's something that you kind of know. You need to be clear in that, hey, I don't know how to make sure this is secure, and so the resources can come in and can help you with that. But it boils down to communication and working with operations team, if that's what your company has available.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's very important for people to not get shamed on things that they lack knowledge in, but rather feel comfortable enough to express it so that they can get the help they need. So there isn't, especially when there is client information being exchanged
Yep.
through the thing that they are not sure about being secured.
Yep, 110%. And I think I think that we're starting to see a renaissance in that particular area, where when I first started, if you didn't know something, you didn't say anything.
Yeah, yeah.
You just nodded, and then you went to your bookshelf, because again, internet was not
Yeah.
great back then. And you went to your bookshelf and you grabbed your C# book, and you looked up, okay, I need to call the Windows API, because that's what they want to use. And you go look up the API, and then you pull out Dan Appleman's giant using the Windows Win32 API book, which was like this thick, like this. And you go look it up and be like, okay, so in VB I got to do a pointer like this, and different things like that. But you never said like, oh, I don't know how to do that. You just figured it out. But I think as an industry we've grown out of that. Or I hope we're on the path to growing out of that. And even me, I don't know everything, and I'll just say it. I'll be like, I have no idea what that is. Like I've never worked with Elasticsearch, which is a big feature over, I believe, in AWS. And so if someone said, hey, can you do Elasticsearch? I would be like, no, but I'll figure it out. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't be afraid to say that. And if I was going to do Elasticsearch, I would like to be partnered with someone that was an expert in it, because then
Mhm.
you'll learn a lot faster anyways. So watching someone who is just competent in a particular tool or something, like I'm getting chills now just thinking about it. Just working with someone who really knows what they're doing is like watching someone do a painting or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah, coding is art, and I also think as it goes along the lines, like there's so much more like technology now that's why we have more people who are like JavaScript experts or something like that. Because it's just there's such a large pool of things to learn that it's so hard for someone to be fully knowing
yeah,
everything about everything.
yeah, expert in all
Yeah.
things. Yeah, I don't think you see that very often. I have trouble keeping up, and I try.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, let's get to the next question, which is how can the principles of least privilege and defense in depth be applied to secure a deployed application?
Okay, so we'll tackle the questions one at a time. The first one was least privilege. Okay, so
Mhm,
again, least privilege we discussed earlier this week, and what least privilege is I'm gonna give my the okay. So when you run an application, in particular, if you're running a website in IIS, they're run in an application pool, and the application pool identity, that's the user who is managing the worker process in IS, I believe. I might not be 100% correct on that, but that's the permission that app pool gets. It determines what it can do in the operating system and that kind of thing. So you want to make sure that your code is just running with just the minimum amount of permissions you need. You never want to run it as administrator. You never want to just turn on all the permissions, because if you're ever compromised, the user has elevated privileges, and they could do more destructive things. So that's the idea of running with least privilege. And again, that's a deployment feature, right? Because we're deploying into an application, so we need to understand the environment that our application is running in, so that we can make sure that we've secured that environment to the best of our capabilities. Defense in depth has to do with the architecture of the application. Again, we spoke earlier this week, or I did a live stream about where I talked about 3-tier in-tier based architecture. So what that basically is I have defined application layers, and they can be hosted on different machines. They could all be on one machine. It could be a monolith. I have these defined pieces, and each piece is taking security in consideration. So from the UI, I'm validating user input, making sure I'm not getting anything weird over there. Then I'm passing it up to my API layer, where my business logic is. My business logic is doing its validation. and doing all of its business checks that it needs to do to make sure, that we're going to be consistent data wise. We're not leaking, and we're not exposing the application to fall. And then from there, we're going to go to our persistence, or sometimes called data access layer. We're going to go to our persistence layer, and we're going to say, okay, and then again, we're going to validate the input from all the layers before it. We're going to validate it again, make sure everything's good, and then we're going to persist down into our data store. And that's defense in depth. And what that gives you is just every point where the application is handing off, it is doing validation and checking to make sure that the input is within the expected range of values that we're expecting. That helps us prevent crashes. And then if one layer gets compromised, they still have to compromise two different layers.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like defense in depth is kind of having layers of validation. And then the principle of least privilege is pretty much don't give everyone super admin.
Yeah.
Because that'll mess you up more than help.
To do the work you need to do. And sometimes you need to give an application permissions to write outside of the Windows directory. Out of the directory that it's hosted in IIS. Sometimes there's a valid business case for that. Maybe you want to centralize your logging, and you want the logs to be written out to a common log share. And so then the default application pool identity, which is machine specific, is not going to do that job. So you need to give it an actual login that has permissions to do some stuff on the network. But you want to give it a login that only has rights to write to that log directory, right? And so if the application is compromised, the user is going to assume the permission of that process, and whatever permissions it has, that the compromised application, the user is going to have those permissions. So Green, it wouldn't be great if your logs were shipped out, but that would be a lot better than your logs getting out. And because you had network admin privileges, you also got all of the accounting databases and that kind of thing. So you want to take that into consideration for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get to our third and final question for the day, which is, how important do you think continuous monitoring and periodic audits are in a security of deployed applications?
I think that's I think it's super important. So you want to first thing I do in the morning. We have one particular client that we're working for right now. The first thing that I do every morning is we own production. We're currently in process of transitioning that over to an internal team, but right now we own production. So every morning when I wake up, the first thing I do is go and check my logs. I go and check the event viewer, and I just make sure what I'm checking for primarily is the health of the application. But I'm also checking to see, if there was any weird errors or if there was any weird info. A lot of times I'll see people, trying to post up data to some random page, and it'll be a cross-site scripting attack or some type of SQL injection they're trying to do. They don't work, obviously, but I mean, they're going to attempt it, right? They're looking for a way in. And so you'll see a lot of those come up. And then, I'll communicate with the networking team and say, hey, this IP's been hitting us, and they're just passing. It looks like an attempt to crack into the system. So why don't we just block them? And then we block it, which isn't super. It's a good method, but again, I can just right now go reboot my router and tell it to get a new IP address, and then it's not assigned to me anymore. So kind of an easy one to get around, but it is a preventative measure. But I'm always checking the logs in the dashboard to make sure we're not getting faults. So, I mean, you also want your application to be up and available and not having problems. So I think monitoring and checking that out is super important. And there's different ways that you do that, and it depends on the situation. I know I say it depends a lot. I feel like I say it all the time, but really in this industry, there's a lot of factors you got to take into consideration before you say, yeah, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, well, that's why there's custom software solutions, or there's people like us that you can get in a consult with, where we can specifically help you. Because I don't know, in my experience of programming and stuff, a lot of the stuff I'll need a very specific case of how to code something, and sometimes you just can't find it on Google. So I can't even imagine, if you don't have coding experience, trying to look up something and try to figure out how to do it just from someone who isn't specifically talking to you, like with how many things can be different in this
Yeah,
industry.
yeah,
Like it
yeah,
just does
yeah.
depend. Like,
It gets crazy.
yeah. That's why sites like Stack Overflow are so popular because there's
Oh yeah.
just so many different variations of everything that can be talked about.
Stack
That
Overflow and Google used to be tabs that were up all the time, and
yeah.
I gotta be honest, since ChatGPT came out, about 95% of my questions can be answered by it.
Yeah.
And so it's mostly a ChatGPT window now. Hey, I'm trying to write this code and it's not working right. What do you think? And then it's like, oh yeah, here, do this, and then you're like, oh okay. Sometimes it doesn't work, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's a good attempt, and it's I don't know, it just feels better than like Google.
Yeah, well, I heard between that and GitHub Copilot, at least from Brandon, that
Mhm.
those things, like, help, like, speed it up because you don't have to be, like, trying to figure out how to word it perfectly in a Google search engine so you get the
Yeah,
right thing out of
yeah,
it, right?
yeah. You could ask specific questions and then it understands. I'm using air
Yeah.
quotes. Understands your code. It is actually pretty impressive. You could take a function that's like way deep in the code, right? So like there's like 5 functions in the call stack before you actually get here, and you can just paste in that one function, say like, tell me what's wrong, and it'll be, and it makes educated guesses about the code that comes before it, and it's usually right. And so it'll tell you like uh, uh, the other day I was having a conversation with ChatGPT, and I was trying to figure out they're called regular expressions, and so I was trying to figure out a pattern that would match kind of a complicated thing. We were trying to match we were reading these numbers in, and they start with a series of letters, and then there's a number. That's the normal case. The edge case is a series of letters with a number and more series of letters and then another number. Then another edge case was a series of letters, number, a series of letters which were related, then the end of it started with another 2 letters which weren't part of the series of numbers that I wanted to do. It was crazy. It took me a minute to
Yeah.
to get that worked out, but ChatGPT was super helpful.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the main thing is, like, ChatGPT is a great asset, just be aware, like, for everyone in the audience that when you use it, you do not wanna give it data that you do not want public. Like, everything should be, like, kind of like how HIPAA is, where it's like, if you talk about a patient, it should not have any identifiers type of thing.
Yeah.
I think it's, like, the same realm as
Yeah,
that.
yeah. The same realm as that, and also you need to check its work. Don't just
Mhm.
finally check it. There was a couple of lawyers who were recently they got, I think they're getting disbarred, but they used ChatGPT to do their legal brief and then didn't read it, and a bunch of its citations were just completely made up. Like it
Oh,
just made up random court cases that never actually happened.
that's
And
stressful, yeah.
that's what I heard. That's what the article said. I just read a couple articles about it because it was interesting as related
Yeah,
to GPT. And so I don't want to say 100%. I know that story's true, but it was by 2 different news agencies, and they were claiming that they got in big trouble, and ChatGPT gave them a bunch of court cases that weren't real. But I mean, always check your work if you're using
yeah,
ChatGPT. If you're even if you're copying and pasting code from Stack Overflow, you really need to understand what the code is doing. Same
yeah,
thing with ChatGPT. If you're grabbing code from there, or Copilot even, you need to double check it. I mean, it could look right and have like a very subtle bug. Like the other day, uh, I was having some code out and it gave me something that looked like it would be good. Hit the tab button, moved on, and then when I was in testing, I found out that it did not equal instead of equal. and
oh.
and so all of my normal cases were failing, and the case that I was trying to test was passing. And I was like, what's going on here? And I looked at the code and I was like, oh yeah, that's a not, and that is not an equal. It didn't take me too long to find it, but that was one of the ones where I kind of it looked good right up front, but I didn't give it a lot of attention. And then when I
Yeah.
went into test to make sure everything was working okay, it turned out that
Yeah, that's kind of what happens when things are like everyone wants stuff faster and faster and faster, so you're just
yeah,
trying to optimize as much as you can, but
yeah,
then, like, sometimes you need to take it slow in
yeah,
order to be
yeah.
able to be like, "Oh, yeah, this is correct."
Yep, yep, yep.
Okay, well, is there anything else that you wanna say before we close out for the day?
I just want to say to anybody out there watching, if if you have any questions, send them in. Happy to answer them for you. If you want to have a side conversation, we're open to that, and we're extremely interested in talking to people and figuring out, again, how other people are using technologies in their various industries. I've gotten super curious as I've gotten older, because I started to realize, after being in many different spaces like manufacturing, automotive, banking, government, that the use of technology, obviously there's a ton out there, varies greatly, and
Yeah.
and you'll see in certain industries that there'll be these things that'll be standards. Like, again, in the automotive industry, you have that third party that's operating as a translation layer between information you're trying to send to the dealers that are selling the automobiles, and understanding the whys behind that are interesting. And then how did the industry just decide on XML, and then SOAP, and that kind of thing, and then why did they stay there? Like,
Yeah.
why didn't any of it evolve? Like, I feel like some industries just get to a certain point and they're like, that's good,
Yep.
we'll just stay here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to understand the why people in the industry aren't, oh, we have a new JSON endpoint and now you can connect up to us, or you could just wire up directly to our dealer management system by doing this, and then you could save $1 per every transaction,
Yeah.
and which can add up to
Yeah.
quite a lot of dollars.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, I agree. Especially when I was going to school for pre-med, I was like really surprised that like mostly what we used was Excel, and it's like these very like intricate things that we're doing, and what we're using is Excel. And I was like, I just thought that there would be something more complicated at this point.
well, I'd say I don't think I'm breaking any laws by telling this story, but I did some work with the Chemical and Biological Weapons Department for the DoD, and when we started doing the work, that they were doing a lot of stuff by just emailing around Excel documents.
Yeah, yeah,
I was super surprised. I'm not saying that's wrong. That's obviously what the business evolved to, or the organization, since it was a governmental agency. But I was just surprised when I got in there. I was like, wow, I mean, you guys have an important job, and up to this point, the I don't want to disparage anybody, but up to this
yeah,
point, the best you could come up with was like sending Excel sheets to each other. I'm like, that's crazy.
yeah.
and
No
yeah,
encryption.
yeah, no encryption, no database, just emailing it around, and someone would update it and then email it back to the group, and then and I think there's a lot of businesses that kind of run under that
Mhm.
same model too. And again, I'm not saying it's a bad model. If it works for you, it works for you. That's fine. But in certain areas, with the advancements in technology we've had, sometimes you expect things to be further along than they are. And then, but a lot of times businesses and organizations and government institutions will just get stuck in, we've just been doing it this way for so long, and you just don't think about it anymore. Every
Yeah, yeah.
morning I get up and I update my Excel spreadsheet and email it out to the group.
That's what I do.
Email back to me. And
Yeah,
it just becomes a thing. And so I think businesses can be helped by outsiders coming in and saying, "Hey, this is a thing, and I know it's working, but maybe you want to consider doing it this way." And you can save 2 hours a week,
yeah.
5, 10, 20 hours a week by not having someone sit down every day and do this task that a computer will do much faster with a lower error rate.
Yeah, and then maybe more security precautions
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Uh, and I also wanted to say, if anyone does want to talk about technology in their business or how they use technology in their day to day, we are up for doing a private call or even on stream to talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
So reach out. Like, there's no like stipulations for how you want to speak about it. We just want to hear what you're using and how you're using it.
Yeah, and it also helps people decide if they're looking for work or they're out. It also helps people decide if that's an industry that they want to get into. If you come into the automotive space, chances are, especially on the extended warranty sides, chances are you're going to be dealing with older technologies, and you need to decide if that's something you want to do. Maybe you just want to be the React Next.js guy, and you want to be working on the latest version of Angular, and you want to be out there on the cutting edge, and you want to be doing Blazor and those different types of applications, and that's good. And just having an understanding of, because even when you read a job posting, it doesn't really give you a clear picture. Like, you could see the requirements of the job, but it doesn't give you a clear picture of exactly how they're doing it. Like, we've been talking with a couple of companies, and the job posting was X, and then you get in, you start talking to them, and you're like, well, that's kind of the vision of where they want to go, but it's going to be a long path to get there. So you go in and get that job, and you're all excited about your Vue app that you're working on, and you come in, they're like, oh, but we have to maintain this ASP web form app until we get the Vue app done. and then because you're the new guy, 90% of your job is now web forms, which I was doing in 1996, so it's fairly old.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people want to work in that stack. So it's just nice to kind of know what you're getting into, because a lot of job postings will kind of lean towards more the futuristic version of where they want to be, and not I got to hire the AWS guy right now, even though they have nothing in the cloud. They've not even looked at the cloud. They've not considered any of the costs. They haven't tested the cloud. They're not ready to migrate to the cloud yet. And you come in, you think like, yeah, I got this AWS stuff down. And then, the first year of your job, you're sitting there trying to figure out how to even start getting something in AWS with the current setup and keep everything running at the same time. It can be a challenge.
Yeah, it sometimes feels like you're like doing the consulting for the first little bit of your job of trying to help them visualize how to get there.
Yeah. Well, which is an important step, but the job posting specifically asks for AWS skills, and so you go in with the intention of you're going to be doing AWS cloud computing, and it's more like the pre-setup to AWS cloud computing.
Yeah, and I think that's why we as Atmosoft will be helpful, because if you're looking for someone, we could either supply you with that person, or we can consult you to help you understand who you're exactly looking for and what kind of skills you're looking for, to maybe help with your job posting to get someone who's better equipped to do both rather than just one.
Yep.
Okay. Well, is there anything else, or are we good to close out?
That's all I throw that on the end. Kind of went on a random tangent, but it's a live stream, so
that's just what's gonna happen. Yeah,
gotta roll with it.
Yep.
It's more fun that way. Sorry, it really is. Like, just
agree.
Talking about it, and then like you find something interesting, and or a challenge, and you start discussing it, and you're like, let's dive into that, because it can be difficult.
Yeah, I like more conversational live streams usually, for me personally, when I'm viewing them. So that's tends to be kind of the type of content I produce.
Monologue versions. I'm still going to do a few because I think they're important, but they're going to be shorter ones. I did not like my 30-minute monologue sessions. They just, I'm not saying they're bad, but I mean it's like, it's more fun to have somebody bounce off of.
Yeah,
take a break for a second, let someone else talk, and grab a drink.
Yeah, it's also nicer because it helps you kind of keep an eye on who your audience is. I think for me, at least, when I'm creating content, it's hard for me when I'm by myself to keep in mind who the audience is, and not just talking about something I'm interested in.
Yeah, or when you're by yourself and your chat thing starts popping up, you're like, want to read it.
Yeah.
But you have to keep talking. Or you feel like you have to keep talking. I guess you don't. I see lots of people pause all the time and go in and read them when they're doing just the individuals. But yeah, it is nice to have someone else chime in. Well, Brett just said,
Yeah. It helps to have those pauses. I think it's just also nicer for viewing. But anyways. Thank you to everyone who decided to join our live stream today. It was very fun talking about the securing your application after deployment. Are we going live on Fridays, or no?
Yeah. No, I'll do a Friday. You don't have to jump in, but I'm gonna do one tomorrow.
I'm good doing one tomorrow. Okay, so we will be back again tomorrow then at 3 p.m. the same time we have been. Please make sure to follow Bill so that you get notified about when he goes live, because I will also be there and we will be talking about more security. And then next week, we will figure out what our theme is then. If you have any themes that we want to talk about, please message, comment, or let us know in some form of social media, and we will be sure to talk about that. Otherwise, I hope you guys all have a lovely day and remember to stay curious.
Yeah,
Bye.
definitely. All right, bye.